Hi, everyone. I'm Brene Brown, and welcome to the Texas Tribune Festival. A couple of the most important things that I've learned over the last few decades of research really have to do with the importance of hard conversations. One, I think we make the most magic out of conversations where there's discomfort and tension, different experiences, different lived experiences, different ideas. The second thing I've learned is the key to staying in those conversations is curiosity. While you're here at the festival, I think there are going to be a lot of hard conversations. And my wish for you is that you lean into them with curiosity. And as my friend Harriet Lerner says, that you listen with the same passion and energy with which you want to be heard.
Hey guys.
Good. There you all.
Boy, girl, boy, girl.
Great.
Hey, everybody.
I told Tim, like Texas today, the Bulwark is in the big house.
Yeah.
Right? After last year, the crowds were so big at the church, we said we need to get a bigger boat. It's like Jaws.
All right, we're upgrading.
Everybody, good afternoon or good morning. I'm Evan Smith, the co-founder of the Texas Tribune. Welcome to the 2024 Texas Tribune Festival and what is always the most eagerly anticipated conversation of the weekend. It's called No Bull from the Bulwark, an opportunity to talk about the news of the day and the politics of the moment. And this year, the most consequential election cycle of our lifetimes with 4 country-over-party OGs. You may know them from the Bulwark, one of the buzziest digital media organizations out there, or from their many inescapable appearances on cable television, or from their past lives in government advocacy and campaigns. Let me introduce them and then we'll get started. Amanda Carpenter, a writer and editor at, yes, give her a big hand. A writer and editor at Project Democracy, which is a cross-ideological nonprofit dedicated to defeating the authoritarian threat. She was previously a writer for the Bulwark. Before that, she worked on Capitol Hill as Ted Cruz's communications director.
You were supposed to leave that line out, Evan. That was out. Yeah.
The internet is archived. And she was also Jim DeMint's speechwriter. Bill Kristol is co-founder and editor-at-large of the Bulwark. He hosts the Conversations with Bill Kristol podcast. He was a founder of the Weekly Standard and is a director of Defending Democracy. Now you can get ready to boo again. What seems like an eternity ago, he was chief of staff to Vice President Dan Quayle.
We like Dan Quayle. Who's Dan Quayle voting for?
Standing ovation.
Yeah, right.
Somebody asked who Dan Quayle is.
We gotta figure that out.
All right. Sarah Longwell is founder and publisher of the Bulwark and the co-founder of Defending Democracy Together. She's the host of the Focus Group podcast and the co-host of the George Conway Explains It All to Sarah Longwell podcast. The latter, the George Conwell Explains It All podcast, is recording before a live audience today at 12:30 at the Omni. I know you'll want to be there. Finally, Tim Miller. There was talk backstage about Tim Miller groupies. Are you all Tim Miller groupies?
Keep your bras on. Keep your bras on.
Tim?
Thank you.
Tim Miller is the Bulwark's writer-at-large, the author of the New York Times bestseller, Why We Did It, a travelogue from the Republican Road to Hell. He's an MSNBC analyst, and he was communications director for Jeb Bush's 2016 presidential campaign. It's good to have you all here. Give them a big hand. So, speaking of the Internet Archive, I went back in the Wayback Machine to the conversation that Bill and Tim, Mona Charen, and Charlie Sykes had with me at this festival last year. I wanted to remind myself what we talked about under the heading of what a difference a year makes. Here were the 3 things principally that we talked about. One was the bedwetters concerned about Joe Biden's age.
That's right.
Yeah. And who were the bedwetters? Was Charlie? Yeah.
Right. The second thing was Nikki Haley, who was still in the race at the time, warning that actually if Biden's elected, Kamala Harris will be president before the end of his term, and that would be bad. And this is the best one. The third thing we actually talked about was the Republican rescue fantasy that if Donald Trump stumbled in the primary, JD Vance would be the nominee of the
Oh, okay, that's pretty good.
right? Wow. Bill, I mean, what a difference a year makes.
for three.
But really, what a difference 6 weeks makes, right?
Yeah. Is it 6 weeks now? Just
I
after,
guess it's
right?
about 6 weeks.
6 plus, yeah.
Yeah.
It is hard to believe. What if the Biden team had done what everyone else has done in the history of modern presidential debates and scheduled the first debate for after Labor Day?
Right.
Next week.
It would be September 10th.
Well,
It would
in
be
fact,
next week.
the former
Joe
president
Biden,
has been saying, maybe I shouldn't have debated him.
Yeah.
Maybe he shouldn't have.
No, it's unbelievable.
Right?
Really.
Yeah.
No, so I was an early Joe Biden should step down, be a successful one-term president guy. I was a year and a half ago, and I thought it, honestly, I thought it would be better for him, better for the country. I was less alarmed by his actual state, but that became pretty alarming. So, yeah, who knows? I mean, I do think we haven't quite been through this scenario before, right? Yeah. And Harris, I would think about her. She's run a terrific campaign for the first 6 weeks, but we've never had someone who's, almost everyone we've nominated has been through primaries, right?
Yep.
And we're tested and did a billion debates and a million speeches and Qs and TV interviews. I was talking with Axelrod the other day who said that, one forgets, Clinton was not that great a candidate at the beginning in 91, and he made mistakes, and he had real challenges with Jennifer Flowers and all that, and he and Hillary came through. Obama had a kind of sputtering start, remember, in 2007, and then he had that Jackson-Jefferson dinner and sort of hit it, and then he really surged.
Yeah.
I mean, she does not have the advantage of that. And she has the advantage of a short campaign and being an incredibly fresh face at a time when everyone was sick of the idea that it was going to be Trump v. Biden. So that's a huge advantage for her. The disadvantage, and what makes me nervous about Tuesday night, is that she doesn't have the normal, preseason. Right?
Reps.
Yeah, the reps. But the preseason, it's like, suddenly it is like being brought up from AAA, and you're brought up September 1st, you pitch a couple of times in the stretch, and then you're starting the World Series, Yeah.
I mean, Amanda, this makes me wonder why all of our campaigns are so long, right? Like the value for her of that short campaign. I mean, I know what the value for us would be, but the value for her is that it's sort of, everything Bill said is both true and doesn't matter if in the end she's able to get through Tuesday and get on to November 5th and she wins. All the ways in which this was an anomalous campaign will not matter.
Yeah, right? I think that is true, but I think you have to also give her credit in the fact that she was vice president. So she has been getting reps in behind the scenes,
right,
although that we don't really observe it. And she also has the benefit of essentially having a campaign in a box. I mean, she largely did not put the infrastructure together
right
in the state's campaign, even in terms policy-wise, the agenda that she's running on. So I think there's a lot of things going for her that probably make this short campaign season look more successful than it otherwise would have been. But also I just want to talk about the build-up to this massive amount of momentum that seemed to come forward when she did take the nomination. I work in the democracy space right now, of course, doing a lot of stuff at the Bulwark still and talking about those conversations, but I'm not sure that enthusiasm would have been there had there not been a cross-coalition effort to talk about the stakes of this election in terms of the authoritarian agenda that Donald Trump is running on, the things that he's proposing. I think that all in the background built up to the moment where she could essentially launch with this very optimistic freedom agenda, because everyone sort of implicitly knew the negative stuff that Trump and Vance would be running on.
Right. Tim, Amanda mentioned both democracy and freedom. One of the things that occurs to me is that the Biden campaign was largely running on the threat to democracy. Harris, in a very frictionless way, pivoted to freedom, and it came complete with a song.
Yeah.
Right?
And Beyonce.
And it's
I just been whistling Texas Hold'em all weekend to myself, and I was getting it in Amanda's head on the way over here.
Stop.
It's pretty good.
Catchy.
Yeah. But I think that claiming the mantle of freedom as the purpose for this has been one, I think, interesting and very smart change. The other, Karl Rove was just at a session with me over at St. David's, and he said the thing that...
Who's he voting for?
He won't say. Right. But he did say...
How brave.
Whoa.
But he did say this. He said, I thought at the Democratic Convention one of the smartest things was that the Democrats took back patriotism and the flag and I love this country. And so those two things in some ways have pushed democracy a little bit off stage, and that's the
I think that's okay. You know, look, there are obviously, democracy is very important. It's very important at the Bulwark, and there are a lot of voters that care about it deeply, and it mattered in the midterms. There was a significant, you know, it was a minority, but there was a noticeable group of people in places like Arizona that used to be John McCain voters that showed up because of abortion and threats to democracy.
Right.
So it's like, it does matter, but general elections are bigger. And like, there's a bigger group of people you have to get to that kind of zone out when you start talking about democracy and pluralism and, you know, Montesquieu and the stuff that Crystal talks about in his conversations. And, you know.
I'm up here to be the punching bag for all of you. I just want you to know that ahead of time.
You've got to, so you've got to give them something else. And I think the pivot was so fast to being future-oriented, to talking about freedom, to changing the Project 2025 talk to something that was like very in the weeds, procedural about DC, to just more traditional kind of democratic themes about, you know, about taxes and you know, about size of government. So I think that they've been very effective on that switch, and thank God, honestly, because besides the age issue, I do think that Biden was really bogged down in having to defend his record and having to kind of defend the rationale for why he ran originally, which was a lot of democracy related, which was important, but it just like wasn't landing with people, and she was allowed to kind of turn the page on that very quickly.
Yeah. Sarah, I have two questions now for you. The one I wanted to ask is about what your focus groups are saying about this stuff, but I have to take Tim's baton here and say, yes, we've turned the page on the Biden agenda, but doesn't she own it? And shouldn't she own it? It was the Biden-Harris administration. Obviously, the Republicans are trying to saddle her with all the negatives of Biden. I mean, part of that seems to me to be inevitable. She was there. She was part of it. Shouldn't she own some of it?
Nah.
I mean, yeah, no. And this is, look, the voters get to decide whether she owns it or not.
Yeah.
And they've decided she doesn't. I mean,
Isn't that amazing?
it is amazing. It's astounding. And honestly, you know, what Amanda said added on to what Tim said about this is the same team. So the exact same team is running a million-time better campaign right now with Kamala Harris than they were with Joe Biden, which shows you how much a candidate matters.
Candidate matters.
Right? Because
How worthless political consultants are. You know, we just are totally overrated.
well, I don't know. Well, hold on a second, actually. Maybe. I mean, I'm not sure that Kamala Harris was the one who decided. Yeah, I get defensive all of a sudden as a political analyst. I didn't notice. I mean, somebody was like, we're not doing democracy anymore, we're doing freedom, which, by the way, look, having done the focus groups, I get a whole TED talk about this. Americans, broadly speaking, democracy is like a word that has like no meaning and all the meanings. And the reason that when you see polls about who's a threat to democracy, Donald Trump is like, they see Joe Biden as just as big a threat as Donald Trump. And people go, how can that possibly be? And it's because democracy has become polarized, right? Like Republicans think that Democrats stole an election, so they're the ones who are a threat to democracy, and Democrats think Republicans are a threat to an election because, you know, they tried to overturn the last one. And so it becomes sort of meaningless, but freedom is just a coded word that it might as well mean America, it might as well mean like the thing we're doing here. And the campaign, I think, was smart to broaden her out because they knew that she was going to get pigeonholed as a San Francisco progressive. That's what the Trump guys are going to try to do to her.
Right.
And they were going to try to make her own Biden's record. And they just decided to do, like, we're changing the tone, we're changing the language, we're changing everything. And it's worked great for them. Now, the short campaign does allow, to some degree, for Kamala Harris to be a bit of a cipher, right? Like, people are able to project their hopes and dreams onto her in a way that Biden had all this baggage from having made these decisions. And when I was doing the focus groups, I was very nervous about Kamala Harris being the one. So we were, I don't know about Amanda, but the three of us, we were big, Biden's got to step down, Biden's got to step down. People were very mad at us for it. But one of the reasons was I was listening to these voters, including Democratic voters, saying, this guy's not up to it. But I was really worried about Kamala Harris being the one to take over, and we were briefly kind of open primary, Josh Shapiro, Gretchen Whitmer, because I had listened for 2 years to voters say, I don't know her, I don't see her, don't know what she does, and so they had this negative impression. But that's the thing about impressions. They're not locked in. And so and I started to go back and listen to the way that they were talking about her, and I was suddenly like, you know, this can be the biggest opportunity. When you don't know her, you don't see her, have no idea what she does, that means she can walk out and be like, hey, I'm new. Let me introduce myself to you, which is what's been happening.
But it went.
There's one footnote, though, to Sarah's point, which I think is absolutely right, that we haven't really, though, quite tested how much of a burden the incumbency could be made by the Republicans in the next 8 weeks or whatever it is. I mean, maybe Trump's so undisciplined and they're running.
Well, if only he would stop talking about E. Jean Carroll, we'd find out.
But at the debate, 60 million people will be watching Tuesday night, and Trump's not a total idiot. He's done 5 or 6 of these presidential debates. People like me thought he lost them to Hillary Clinton, but you know what? He knows TV. He knows how to do that kind of stuff, sort of. If he just turns to him and says, okay, borders are. I mean, Biden made you borders are, and read one sentence of what Biden said in 2021 when he asked Harris to take a look at the border stuff and all that. You proud? You proud of what's happening on the border? You defend that? Well, what's the answer? I mean, luckily, in a weird way, the debate rules, I think, may help her on this kind of thing. There's not that chance to get into a real back and forth. But there are 3 or 4. Afghanistan is good. Let me just.
That's what that Arlington Cemetery stuff was about.
I mean, that was a disgrace what Trump did at Arlington Cemetery, a true disgrace, and really deserved all the criticism he got. Once Harris got into it, though, which I think was maybe a little unwise tactically, should have let everyone else just criticize Trump, then Trump produced the Gold Star families who said, well, look, we did invite him there, and we appreciate him coming, and we're okay with the video if he uses it for some campaign. And incidentally, we've never met with Vice President Harris. And it was the Biden-Harris administration who were in charge when our kids.
Have you heard
family?
that
And I think I'm now worried. And he'll bring the families to the debate. Right. And I'm not so sure that issue is now bounced in a positive way for Harris. She's got, I mean, for other reasons, I think she's sort of stalled out. So the incumbency she's good, and she's done a great job of liberating herself as much as she can. But I'm just saying, if one wants to be nervous about the next several weeks, one thing to be nervous about is that there are 3 or 4 things they could try to really, they could try to make it about Biden-Harris.
Now, this is where you get to find out, though, if she's good. Because she can, those are opportunities. Every single one of those criticisms is an opportunity. I wasn't the border czar, and frankly, I think we need more funding at the border. I think we need to be tougher on the border.
I'll sign the bill.
You ruined it. You fucked up the border.
Well, she turns it into a forward-looking issue.
Right.
But it's easy for us to say that, and my only point would be these debates are very high pressure and difficult. It's easy for us to say that. We'll see if she can pull it off. I very much hope she can. And weirdly, I don't like these debate rules, and I think they're ridiculous. They helped Trump. Of course, it didn't matter much for Biden in the first debate. But the idea that you give a 2-minute answer and then a 2-minute rebuttal with no back and forth, that's not a debate. That's just little 120-second speeches.
A joint appearance.
And Trump is pretty, he can just do his lying and his demagoguing for 120 seconds and without being called on it. On the other hand, it does give her a chance to realize, forget about Trump. Put him back, stiff arm if you have to. If he says lies about you, just rebut the lies quickly. There you go again, Donald. But speak to the American public. My only advice to Harris would be forget about Trump too as much as you can. Yeah. You've got 40 of the 90 minutes probably, right? Each candidate will have about 40, 45. Speak directly to the American people. It is a chance, as Sarah said, for her to continue the reintroduction of herself that she began at the convention.
To this idea that she has to pivot from the agenda of the administration, or is she going to be able to answer some of these questions? One of the interesting things that you said after the convention, listening to her convention speech, specifically on foreign policy, was, tell me how this would have been different if Condoleezza Rice had given this speech. And, a lot of people have said, I got to give him that. He's right about that. So maybe she's already sort of started to make strides in this direction.
They know. Look, I think there's a lot of people that are overconfident right now about this campaign, but the campaign isn't. Like, they know this is a very close race. They've run a very smart race, and they're running to the middle. They're not abandoning the base. Like, they're doing both, right? They need to do both. They're kind of exciting the base, with a lot of the superficial stuff. But policy-wise, they've been olive branching to the middle, and I think that she's been conscious about that. The convention was very conscious about that, and I think that she will and she did it at the Dana Bash interview, where she was like, I got in here and I decided we need to compromise more, and that's something you learn. You got to be president for everybody, and we're going to compromise. Like, she explicitly said, I care about compromising and moving to the middle.
And that's a sufficient answer on issues where she's changed her position.
So. And it's a much better answer than what we were stuck with before, which was, well, I don't know. If you look at the inflation rate, it's actually down to 2% this month versus 3%, and the crime rate dropped and it's just like, nobody wants to hear that shit. Like, just move forward, and I think that she has a positive forward-looking message, and I don't think that she has to carry that. It might not feel fair to Trump. Also, there's some negatives about being a black woman and the first black woman candidate, right? You have to deal with some of the implicit misogyny. You have to deal with can she stand up to the generals and the sexist shit that Jesse Waters is saying on Fox? You got to deal with all that. But one of the benefits is she doesn't read like the Biden administration. Because it's like, no, actually, this is not an old white guy. It's somebody new. And I think that she has used that to her benefit.
But that's the thing about the debate. I mean, I think we could wish it's going to be all about policy, but Donald Trump is going to try to go at her hard, knock her off her game, and her biggest task is showing the American public that she can stand up to him, but also not overreach and lose control in that kind of very difficult discipline setting. And so I think this is going to be more about how do the personalities clash, what are they like temperamentally, than any kind of like check the box policy matchup.
And needling him, which seems to be what they're saying is going to be the strategy, trying to get under his skin.
Are they saying that?
She will not do that directly, in my opinion.
I mean,
look, I listened to your conversation with Carl was very interesting, but actually, the odds of Trump's numbers, favorable, unfavorable, changing by more than 2% in the next 6 weeks are very low. Everyone has an opinion about Trump, and everyone knows everything about Trump.
Low ceiling, high floor.
Yeah, and it is what it is. And she's the one, she's moved up in favorable, really favorable, not approval, in favorable about, what, 10 points since the nomination. If she can keep the favorable number going up, she wins. It's about her. This race is about Harris.
So don't needle him.
For me, analytically, it's about Trump, and it says we got to beat Trump. It's a huge threat to American democracy and American freedoms. But politically, I believe, and so this is what Tim was hinting at this, the political dynamics different from the kind of academic, intellectual dynamic. Politically, the race is about Harris. Can she cross the bar of being likable? She's done an excellent job on that. Centrist enough, she's done a very good job on that, and tough enough to be considered presidential.
You know, one of the things that reporters ask me all the time about the focus groups is they're like, well, will America elect a woman president? Will they elect a black woman president? And it can be kind of disheartening listening to voters talk about women candidates. They say...
It can be kind of disheartening listening to voters at all.
Oh, no.
Okay.
I shouldn't say that. I know. Sarah likes it. Sarah likes doing it. You know?
Well, you hear the guy in the group who's like, well, I don't know. What if she's on her period? Well, something's happening, and then what happens? And it just like, and what if she gets to...
I'm sorry, is it gaming? Or is she still... Is that still happening?
This is not just...
I got a lot to learn.
Let me guess, it was an older man that asked this question.
It's like or just like, or people saying like, boy, I'm just like, maybe women are so emotional, and I'm like, Donald Trump throws ketchup at the wall. Like, who's the emotional one?
Right, exactly.
But there is this sense among voters, right? And this is when people talk about like what is the baked-in misogyny. It's sort of things like this, and you hear it from both women and men, which is like, hey, look, a lot of world leaders don't respect women. Like, this isn't me. I'm not saying it, but I just worry. And they also worry. So they worry about whether or not they can stand up to the autocrats in the big dangerous world, and they also worry about what other people are going to do. So they'll be like, I'll vote for a woman, but I'm not sure other people will vote for a woman. And so one of the things that I think is really important, and I've made this point, I think we made it at our Dallas show, but I think like Donald Trump is a stand-in in this debate for autocrats across the world, right? Like people want to know, can she handle like lunatics and bad people and big bad men like Putin, bullies. And so I think that it's a big task, right? Because she has to both show command of the substance. I would not needle him. This is not about Donald Trump, you guys saw him at the National Association of Black Journalists? He just melts down in front of black women. He wants to be so insulting that he can't help himself. And so she will rattle him more by showing control of the substance and by like having command of the stage. And then he will do what he did against Biden. I mean, I can't tell you of all the debates that I think I've seen in my career that have mattered, it was the debate with Trump versus Biden in 2020, where Trump had COVID and obviously was trying to kill Joe Biden with COVID, but also was just like, he was bananas in that debate. And everybody was like, what is this heavy breathing lunatic? Because and you might say that's how he is all the time, but voters aren't tuned in all the time, and so it is a big showcase.
Well, in fact, the debate is going to be the biggest stage for them that remains between now and the election, right?
I mean,
this is probably going to be the one and only debate, we assume.
Could be two.
Tim, you know that Liz Cheney was at the festival yesterday?
Who's that?
Not yay big, blonde hair, right?
I know you don't see women, Tim. She's
Liz Cheney.
That was good.
Oh, that was good. Yeah.
Good clap back. So Liz Cheney was here with Mark Leibovich of The Atlantic yesterday and told all of us, after 3 days ago saying she was voting for the Vice President Harris when she was at Duke University, she came here yesterday and said, that her father, the former vice president, was going to vote for Vice President Harris as well. Now we've seen everything, right? Yeah. Is that more than just a permission structure for people who are already going to vote for Vice President Harris? I mean, I wonder, Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney voting for Vice President Harris is on the one hand really interesting as we sit here and soberly talk about this, but in terms of moving the needle, does it change one vote?
I think it can. Look, I think that there's a group of people that do matter out there. Sarah talks to them a lot, but there are a couple of different groups that matter, but like the one that we focus on the most is college educated, mostly men really at this point, because the ladies have already changed. You know, their wives already flipped. They voted for Romney. Maybe they probably didn't vote for Hillary. Maybe they voted for Trump. Maybe they just wrote in. You know, they voted for, like that. Those voters matter and they exist. Okay, they exist in Georgia, in the Atlanta suburbs. They voted for Brian Kemp and they voted for Raphael Warnock. And they do need to be convinced, and a campaign needs to be run to talk to those voters. I think that they did a very good job of that at the convention. I think Liz and Dick are very useful surrogates to that effort. I want to see more. I love that she did it on stage here at the Texas Tribune Fest, but I'd like to see her in the Georgia burbs, put her to work. She got kicked out of Congress, so she doesn't have a job anymore, so she should have time. Hopefully we can see more of Liz.
So you think that she should basically go on a cross-country tour for the next 2 months, and every place she goes, she gives that permission.
I do. And what she says,
And she will, I think.
And she will. And here's the other thing, is she is a doctrinaire conservative, right? And when she talks, she doesn't talk like some of us, like never Trumpers that like have, you know, have code switched essentially into sounding a lot like Democrats. Like she is very fact-based. And I was watching the interview yesterday with Mark, and it's just like, in the crowd, you're just like parched in the desert, just looking for somebody to just say the truth. And she's just this huge glass of water. It's just like, yes, it's so refreshing because it's fact-based. It's not emotional, despite the fact that Dan Crenshaw was over here yesterday saying, oh, Liz is just, her feelings are hurt, and she's so emotional, and that's why it's not that. That's the Dan Crenshaw problem. Liz is fact-based, you know, and she is just, and I think that can be compelling to this small sliver of people that she needs to get to.
Can I just, oh, sorry. Please.
No, you go.
There's a group of people, though, when you think about permission structures, it's not just like Liz to the voters or Liz and Dick Cheney to the voters. There's a big sort of group of other doctrinaire conservatives. There are writers and pundits and thinkers, and they all know that Donald Trump is an existential threat to democracy. They know he is bad for the country. They know he's bad for the GOP. They know he's bad for the world. But they don't like getting their hands dirty. They don't like to say, they'll say like, yes, Donald Trump is very, very bad. In fact, he's a unique threat. But they won't, then they'll say, but let me tell you about Kamala Harris's tax policy and how frustrating I am about the 28% corporate tax rate. And they won't say that they're doing both sides. They'll say like, well, I'm just being honest about the fact that she has liabilities too. Liz Cheney saying, your tax policy point is irrelevant in this moment, and when she said you don't have the luxury of writing in names, she was taking a direct shot at a group of influential people who want to have that space. And when she did that, I think that creates a sense for, like, Mitt Romney now could come out potentially and say, he's for Harris, or he's willing to vote for Harris. And those things, it creates a permission structure, I think, at a different level.
Amanda, jump in, and then I want to ask Bill about that.
Yeah, I'm just kind of, so I do agree. It is absolutely significant that Liz Cheney is coming out, that she's going to go on tour. But I do sort of wonder if we're getting in the trap of sort of feeling like, okay, is this one person going to make a difference? Is this one person going to make the difference? And we're not really taking full account of the big trend of people who supported Trump in the last election who are not for him now or on the sidelines. I mean, the fact that his former vice president will not endorse him, I mean, it's like we took note of that and then it went away in the wind. But like there is a big trend. Half of his cabinet will not support him. And so I think we should just be a lot more forthright. And yes, taking notice of the people who are saying, I'm voting for Harris, but also saying, look at all these people that work for his administration who are not for him now, rather than just doing this like single counting one by one. And if people say they want to write someone else in, okay, you are still not for him. And there is a reason why.
Bill, here, the last thing you need me to do is quote Tim Miller to you.
Oh, yeah.
But this to this very point that Amanda is making was Tim a week or 10 days ago. To all the GOP politicians who deep in their heart know that Trump is too grave a risk, to the 17 Republicans who voted to impeach and convict, to the vice president he would have happily left for dead, say it loud and proud, Kamala Harris for president. Now, the reality is that Tim is addressing a couple of different groups of people. People outside of Trump's own administration, who in theory know better, but also John Kelly, Rex Tillerson, go down the list, and maybe Micah Pence, is the cherry on that sundae, right? Does Liz Cheney necessarily work as permission structure for those folks, or are you still going to be asking those questions 2 months from now?
I think she helps, and I think we're working on some of these people, and I think some of them will come around. And some of them, look, if some of them have real reasons of conscience, they feel they can't support Vice President Harris, I think it would be the case with Pence maybe, fine. If he gets 1 or 2 or 3% of his supporters of real strong pro-lifers, principled pro-lifers who felt they had to vote for Trump because of the Supreme Court stuff, if he can get them to stay home this time, some evangelicals, that's a big difference. 3% of that electorate.
With the polls as close in the states.
So I'm not. It's not necessarily chickening out not to support Harris for some people. On the other hand, for others who don't have that extremely strong reason where they just can't cross the aisle, why are they not? I mean, John Kelly, he says all these things about how Trump's a sociopath. He's seen him up close. He doesn't need to reveal any conversations he had in the Oval Office with Trump. He doesn't need to do anything that he would regard as untoward or improper as someone who's been a senior government official. He just needs to say, I saw the man up close. I think we did some good things, he can say, incidentally. I think we accomplished some things in the first term, but he should not be president again. I'm giving you my judgment as a 40-year person in the armed services, and as this former chief of staff and cabinet secretary, he should not be president again. If 3 or 4 of those people who served with Trump would say that on camera, it would make a big deal. And here's why, incidentally. Amanda's totally right about the number of senior types. But you know what? What's depressing? I discussed this with JVL yesterday. I mean, in the voter world, Trump's not doing worse than he did in 2020. Trump's doing slightly better than he did in 2020. We had January 6th. We had Project 2025, and a truly articulated authoritarian agenda in the way that was a little murkier, I'd say, last time perhaps. We have a MAGA movement that's really radicalized and is much more open to truly sinister forces than was evident, at least I think 4 or 5 years ago, when those people were a little more in the background, the neo-Nazi historians, being treated respectably by Tucker Carlson, who in turn is going to be visited by JD Vance, the vice presidential candidate, in 2 weeks. All of that has happened, and what's depressing, if you want to worry about the voters, is the voters, Trump support's hanging in there, 46.5%, 47%.
It's still that close.
It shouldn't be that close. I mean, really. But it is what it is, and we need to win. And so I very much agree that on the margin, people can make a difference.
You mentioned JD Vance. I want to ask about something Trump said a couple of weeks ago in response to a question about his ticket mate. He basically said vice presidents don't matter. I want to ask Dan Quayle's chief of staff if vice presidents don't matter.
Well, I mean, so Quayle I wasn't with him in 88, but he had a miserable vice presidential campaign in 88. They didn't introduce him well, and he had the horrible debate with Benson. Bush won by 10 points.
And they still won.
He did adequately. Here I'm biased. I wasn't chief of staff, but he did adequately in the debate with Gore. Was judged to be even. He didn't hurt the ticket in any way in 20, what year was it? 18th century, 17th century, whatever that was.
Feels like it.
1992.
Right.
He didn't hurt the ticket, and Bush lost to Clinton by 5 points. So as an electoral matter, they don't matter much, except Doug Sosnick, the former Clinton political director, made this point to me the other day. If the VP's flaws sort of illustrate the president's kind of flaws and reasons you might not like him, it can then make a difference, right? I mean, no one thought Bush, whatever Quayle's problems, and he was unfair, and he was a good guy and all this, but whatever his problems, looking young and a little unprepared, no one thought Bush was unprepared, right? George H.W. Bush. So it didn't matter. If you wanted to vote for Bush, you were for Bush. Quayle pick was a little odd, but what the hell, That's not, Vance reinforces the sense that Trump and Trumpism and Trump world and MAGA world are a bunch of weirdo misogynist pigs, to quote Liz Cheney, and other weird things as well, and have this fringe extremist elements that are genuinely off-putting and dangerous. There was that CNN poll that showed, and that's an issue Harris is winning on. Too extreme, Trump 54, to be president, Trump 54%, Harris 44%. If she can just hold that margin, I mean, that'd be huge, obviously, but if she can hold some part of that margin as a reason you can't vote for Trump. So Vance helps make the case about the extremism of Trumpism, I think.
Tim?
Also, Donald Trump's going to be older than Joe Biden is today.
Well, this is the point. So let's go back to Kamala Harris's line during the primary. Shouldn't there be a discussion of whether, because Trump is as old as he is, by the time his first term is over, he won't be president and JD Vance will be president?
Yeah.
She said it about Harris. I mean, it's basically the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah, no. Nikki Haley said about Harris, you mean? Yeah.
Haley.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is weird that Donald Trump has gotten, that the age thing hasn't reemerged with Trump. I think it helps as just vibes-wise. Like, people notice that she's younger. It's part of the change message. It's part of the we're not going back. I think it's going to help a lot during the debate for the people that are just kind of cooking during the debate or parenting, and just like the split screen is going to look a lot better with her being younger. But just as a stated fact, like, people should be reminded that Donald Trump will be older than Joe Biden is today by the end of the next term, and I think that's scary to think about Donald Trump's mental capacity in his fourth year of his second term. That's pretty freaky. But it's also freaky when you have somebody like JD Vance who's having, an event with Tucker Carlson, who's, platforming Holocaust deniers this week and being like, no, actually, you're going to have this cruel, weird extremist potentially as the president who might be even more effective than Trump. I do think that is a legit issue.
Sarah.
And here's one of the things about one of Donald Trump's superpowers is his celebrity. And the celebrity, because people view him as not a regular politician. I knew that DeSantis was cooked with the voters when they all started saying, I don't know, he sounds like a regular politician. Republican voters especially, they hate regular politicians. It's the reason Tucker Carlson's probably going to be the 2028 nominee. But here's the thing about JD Vance. So swing voters hate him.
Bill's mentee.
Yeah. Congrats.
You own him also.
Apparently.
Yeah.
But swing voters hate JD Vance, and voters, I think, dislike him in a way that Trump gets away.
You're hearing this in the research.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the swing voters, the childless cat lady thing. So one of the things that's interesting about voters is always, like, what breaks through culturally. Because a lot of the things that we might talk about here, voters don't. Like, the people who are not political obsessives, they don't notice it. Childless cat lady, everybody's got it. Men, women, and it's like people people will introduce it, and people will be like, I don't have kids, and they will, even men will be like, I don't have kids and I have a dog, but I still think he's out for me. But the fact that he's a regular guy, a regular politician, makes him vulnerable to people's antipathy in a way that Donald Trump gets away with saying. Nothing he has ever said has been truer than when you're a star, they let you do it. Because what it meant was, when you're a star, people judge you differently. They think things are funny when they're, if a regular politician said it, you'd be like, that's very scary. But instead, people are like, oh, this game show host, it's funny.
Amanda, on Vance, I'm asking this question facetiously because I suspect the answer is yes, but did they vet him?
You know what? I was thinking about that. So I actually think they did vet him. And I think
all the stuff that's come out was right there.
So
it was right there.
I think the factor in choosing Vance is that the winning Trump coalition already wrote off suburban women. They learned that they could win, even though locker room talk came out, everything else, because they have a strategy that maximizes, rural male vote. Sarah, you said a couple weeks ago that you need to be watching the gender gap because this thing is going to turn into a huge gulf. And I was absolutely, because Donald Trump is not, he has not been trying to get the female vote. They wrote it off a long time ago. So when people say, oh, how did they miss all this stuff with JD Vance? Look at the people that were advocating that he be the nominee. Don Jr., Charlie Kirk, people who are not even remotely trying to appeal to women. And I actually think that the fact that JD Vance triggers that, they view as a plus.
Can I just throw in, something more ominous? They vetted him.
Yep.
It was a governing pick. They thought that they were going to win, and Donald Trump, Tucker Carlson called Donald Trump and said, if you pick Marco Rubio, the deep state is going to off you. And these guys that is the world they live in. This is not, it might sound crazy here, but they're paranoid, and Trump feels like the deep state was out to get him the last time, and he picked a VP that he knew would be down the line with their isolationist, neo-authoritarian agenda. Yeah, that's why he was picked. They thought they were going to win, and he wanted somebody who's
So if Harris were the nominee at the time, because remember, it seems like a million years ago, it was not that long ago, he picked Vance when Biden was the nominee. If Harris had been the nominee, Bill, does he pick Vance?
I don't know, because he's Trump, and I do think, but the
A limited
overconfidence,
pool.
the overconfidence was a large part of it. It was a Project 2025, if you want to think of it this way, pick, not a 2024 pick. And it was,
Kevin
I mean,
Roberts.
they believe this stuff.
Good line.
That's a good line.
It's yours.
just make
It's
that
yours.
up?
Yes,
That was
you guys
good.
can take it.
Morning shots, Monday.
I better write it down before I forget it in my pants. No, it was. I mean, I think they were overconfident. It was. I mean, he had the assassination attempt Saturday night. He was riding high, and I think if the switch had already happened with Biden-Harris, he might have gone with Tim Scott or someone to reassure some small slice of voters who won't be reassured by Vance. But it really does. I think one thing the Harris campaign needs to do, but frankly all of us in the Pro-Democracy Coalition need to do, is really alarm. I mean, the combination of Vance and Project 2025 and everything else, and the radicalization of MAGA, really is ominous. I mean, we're not talking about a goofy, chaotic,
It doesn't go away if Trump loses.
undisciplined second term where Trump's popping off and mismanaging some things. We're talking about a real authoritarian effort. And in terms of foreign policy, we're talking about just selling out Ukraine and the pro-Putin agenda and so forth. I mean, it's not like the first term where what everyone thinks of McMaster not stepping up, but of others, Bolton and Mattis and all these people, they did check Trump in a large way. And you could tell yourself still in 2020, it's kind of, some of the tweets are bad.
Won't happen now.
Policies. We're still in NATO. It's 4 years later. I got this a ton in 2020. You said he'd be terrible. Still in NATO. He hasn't done anything that irresponsible. He wanted to have a deal with the Taliban, but Pompeo pulled him back. All that stuff. You can't tell yourself that in 2024. I don't think voters understand that, though. It's a little bit of a complicated argument. I mean, Sarah could answer this, but explaining that, well, you sort of made it through the first term. You have slightly whitewashed or whatever fond memories of the economy in the first term. It was a little crazy, but it wasn't horrible. Your civil liberties didn't get affected that much. Saying in a post-Dobbs world, in a 2020 post-Ukraine world, in a Vance Project 2025 world, it's just going to be different. I think it's important to bring that home to a few more voters that has been brought home to. So.
Well, and in fact, here on College Football Saturday, I'll tell you that I saw this morning that the Harris campaign is flying a plane over the football stadium in Ohio with a banner that says JD Vance loves Ohio State and Project 2025.
Michigan.
Right, in Michigan. Yeah.
In Michigan, yeah.
Right.
Oh, good.
Is Texas already winning?
All right.
Okay, there you go. I wasn't going to ask, but thank you.
I see you're very engaged in our panel, checking the football scores.
Take her phone away. That's terrible.
That's national champion Michigan. You'll be one of
Before we go to questions, with the audience, I want to ask. We'll have my colleague Ian Mitra come up and ask questions on behalf of the audience. I want to ask two things. This first one we could spend an hour on itself, but just quickly, the 7 states that we assume will decide this election. Sarah, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
No
Pennsylvania is going to decide this election. It's why look.
Don't do it.
Okay.
Don't do it. We're not going back, Sarah.
Fine, whatever.
do you think she should have picked Josh Shapiro?
Yeah. I mean, look, this is the Republican that's still in me is very utilitarian about these things. Like, pick the guy with 60% approval in the state that you've got to win. It's just Pennsylvania is too big. It's got too many electoral votes. If you win Pennsylvania, you're going to win Michigan and Wisconsin. As long as you pick up Nebraska too, then you're done. You're done. And she's doing a good job of expanding the map. But my concern is like there's more places on the board to play, but they're all the same level of even. And like I just really wanted to lock up Pennsylvania. Like I wouldn't spend a ton of time in North Carolina personally. I would spend it in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. I mean, it's not an academic exercise. I'm going to spend $40 to $50 million with Republican voters against Trump to try to elect Kamala Harris, and we're going to be in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, Nebraska too, and Arizona. Because the one thing about Arizona that I think puts it in play in a better way than the other ones is Carrie Lake's on the ticket, and they're going to have an abortion referendum.
Ballot initiative in Arizona, right? Yeah. So do you assume? Let me just stay with you for a second on this. So abortion is on the ballot in both Arizona and Nevada.
Yep.
It looked like Biden would lose Nevada. Mm-hmm. In fact, I was in Nevada earlier this year, and I saw former Governor Brian Sandoval, and I said, "Who's going to win Nevada?" And he didn't even pause. He said, "Trump."
Yeah.
But that now seems not to be entirely clear. Like she could win Nevada, couldn't she?
Yeah, it's because she managed to put the Democratic coalition back together with the most sort of stunning speed and alacrity that it was unimaginable before we got into this. And one of the reasons is she's doing better with Hispanics. She's doing better with black voters. She's not doing as well as Joe Biden did in 2020. She's still hitting under that. But she's doing much better than what Biden was doing right now. And so she's put Nevada very much back in play. She also Trump's got these stupid economic policies that any Republican normally would be against. She ripped one off. Now they both have the same policy on not taxing tips. And that also helps in Nevada.
That actually helps. So quickly, you agree Pennsylvania's a ballgame?
Well, yes. I mean, but it doesn't absolutely need to be. I mean, I think that you could put together Georgia. I mean, she can win with Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, and then one of the, you got to win two of them though. You got to win Georgia and North Carolina, or Georgia and Arizona, or Georgia and but Pennsylvania's basically the ballgame.
Yeah. Amanda, same.
I trust what Sarah says.
You would have also picked Josh Shapiro.
I don't think you can argue with her pick of Walz just because of the enthusiasm that has been generated.
He's been pretty good.
Yeah, I think she went with her gut, and it turned out to be a good choice.
You also can't. We don't know what we don't know about what would have happened with Israel protests and stuff. Right. We don't know what we don't know.
Right. Bill, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the case for the Walz pick is that she is very comfortable with him, and ultimately what matters is how good a candidate she is. And if she and Shapiro get along fine, but it was a little bit, too, fancy coastal lawyers, I think this does give her a reach into middle America. But I think mostly it's about her comfort.
Right.
So I would defend the pick. Just on this tax on tips thing, which I'm slightly obsessed with because everyone keeps saying, well, she took it from Trump. The culinary workers who kind of matter in Nevada have been for getting rid of the tax on tips
for a very long time.
10 years.
Right.
Every Nevada Democratic senator and representative is for getting rid of it. If Kamala Harris had gone
Oakville
in,
Crystal
the national
is
press,
out.
No, but the national press is like obsessed with it. It's like Trump says it. Harris goes to Nevada and says it 3 days later, ooh, she's out copying Trump. Maybe they should do like 8 minutes of research in Nevada and talk to, what's his name, Ralston, who covers in Nevada.
John Ralston.
Find out. You could not be a Democratic candidate and go into Nevada and not be for getting rid of that at this point.
Then why wasn't Biden doing it?
What?
Why wasn't
There's a lot.
I think he probably
A lot of things Joe wasn't doing. A lot of things Joe wasn't doing.
I know, but Joe Biden wasn't doing it. That is part of the reason. She made it as central as Trump was making it, and it does help in Nevada.
Yeah.
All right, so before Ian comes out, 30 seconds from Sarah Longwell, even a little longer. Why is the Bulwark having such a moment right now? You have built one of the only successful, truly successful new media businesses, undeniably successful over the last couple of years. I mean, you've really done something here. And if you think about it, the kinds of people who you're speaking to, who you're activating, are not as obvious as we might have thought. Like, you've really created a market here.
I think we've created something different than a market. So there's a lot of things I could say about why we've been successful, but there's two that I think are kind of the secret sauce. One
Tim's
is
talent.
What?
Tim's talent.
talent.
Natural-born entertainer.
Always
Tim's natural-born entertaining skills. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Tim thinks there's only one thing that matters.
One is that instead of building a market, we built a community, which I think is we have the smartest comments section, I think, of anybody. We have great readers. They interact with each other. They feel part of something. We were built out of a remnant of people who felt like they either were Democrats who were interested in what conservatives had to say but didn't want to be gaslit by a lot of what the sort of pro-Trump conservative media was saying. Which brings me to the second thing that I think is our secret sauce, which is we're out of fucks to give, and so we tell the truth about everything. Which I'm sorry, I apologize for swearing. Actually,
listen,
Gretchen
Whitmer said motherfucker sitting right there the other night, actually. It's
Big Gretch.
I'm the one who doesn't swear. The boys swear, and I usually don't. But I do think that we were, and then I'll just say as the last thing, because there's a lot of little things that made it work. A bunch of us are very close. Tim and I have known each other forever. Sometimes, I don't say this in front of Bill, but a lot of times people are like, what do you think of Bill Kristol? I'm like, Bill's my best friend. And the JVL is also my best friend, whatever. But we all like each other a lot.
Falling down the road.
You can't get rid of me. So
Amanda's not even with the Bulwark anymore, but she's
coming
family.
back.
She's family. Yeah. And so the Bulwark, or the Weekly Standard team coming over intact, though, gave us an editorial lodestar from the jump that we were able to build from. And then I think just the chemistry between us, between us and the readers has built.
Let me speak up for Sarah. Someone had to have money to make this happen. And I just want to give Sarah a lot of credit. Someone that went out and bushwhacked her way through donor world to find funding, to pay people to put this together. It is no small thing. It is a huge enterprise, and she deserves massive credit for creating this out of nothing.
Love it.
So.
All right.
But it is also Tim's talent. It's undeniable.
Natural-born entertaining
undeniable
skill.
star.
Natural-born entertaining skill.
All right, let me invite Ian Mitra out to ask some questions on behalf of the audience. Ian.
Okay, so this is a two-part question to start off. What happens to Trumpism if Harris wins? Also, what's next for you all if Harris wins?
Sure, Trump hasn't been going anywhere. If Harris wins, Trump might go somewhere and it might reformulate. But look, this was a bottom-up thing. Trump exacerbated a bottom-up thing. The Republican voters want Trumpism. The Republican voters keep voting for the Trumpiest person in every primary. And so until that changes, it's not going to change. And so I think that, hopefully, God willing, Kamala Harris wins and we are out of the most acute threat to the democracy that we are under right now. I pray for that. But even then, I think that what will happen is it will kind of reconstitute in a form that is some kind of populist type of conservatism. I hope it's a more responsible version of it, but it is not going to look like Paul Ryanism. That's for sure. It's going to look a lot like.
We're not going
back.
Borrow a phrase.
It's JD Vance or maybe DeSantis or something hybrid like that. Maybe not those two personalities, but like the agendas that they ran on is where the party's going.
I mean, here's one way just to do the thought experiment of this. Let's say Trump loses by 2 points. It's pretty clear that he's lost. 4 or 5 points popular vote. He's lost. He's still hanging around though. Who wins the primary in 2026? Paxton or Cornyn?
Paxton or Cornyn for the Senate?
Yeah. Paxton, right? I mean, that would be the test. That would be the test. I'll put it this way. We will know a lot more about the future of Trumpism with the actual elections in 25, 26, 27 authority, 28, where there is a Trumpism against, let's call it normie Republicanism. But I'm slightly pessimistic that the pivot comes back too fast.
If I base the answer to that question on every election that's happened recently in Texas, there's no question what the answer is.
Yeah, and then does he lose the general to a centrist Dem? Maybe. That he'd be more vulnerable, I think, than Cruz, who in turn is more vulnerable than Cornyn was to a centrist Democratic candidate in Texas. But I think Texas 26 will be a kind of nice little case study in how politics are going within the Republican Party and then also the Republican-Democratic balance.
So quickly, on the question of what happens to the Bulwark, you just declare victory and shut down?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, we're going to shut down. No, can't stop, won't stop. I don't know if you just listened to the first answer, but if Trumpism is ascendant, as we all believe that it is, we're in a generational fight right now about what this country is going to look like. And I just think the Bulwark is going to be there to be a voice that I think is always going to be unique because it understands where we came from in terms of conservatism and where conservatism is not going. And so somebody's got to be, and the other thing is I think, look, we're gonna have to rebuild some kind of center in this country, and I'm not sure, I think there's more and more an appetite from a certain group of people about how are we gonna compromise our way through this, how are we gonna find pragmatic politicians, how are we gonna get Abigail Spanberger elected to, as president eventually, first governor of Virginia, and that's gonna be our mandate.
You just endorsed Spanberger for governor.
Oh, is that news? Yeah.
That's like the Bulwark hive, though. Those national security moderate Dems, they've got a little text chain about Sarah's Focus Group podcast.
I'm not in your Virginia drop down from your nav bar. I'm sorry, I wasn't actually aware of that. Go ahead. All right.
Yeah, so the next question is, how effective has Trump been in distancing himself from Project 2025?
Not effective.
Yeah.
I mean, he'd love to walk away from it, but they're doing a good job of making him own it, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so.
But the thing that makes it easy to tie together is that, well, number one, if you look at his campaign agenda, there are many specific proposals that match up directly. I think CBS did a recent study on it. There's hundreds. I mean, they are really one and the same. But the thing that underpins Project 2025 and Trump is this autocratic view of the government that is different than traditional conservatism, in which Donald Trump advocates using every lever of federal power to maximize his own political agenda. That's essentially what he's trying to do, whether it's pardoning January 6th rioters, weaponizing the Department of Justice to go after his enemies. And what Heritage helpfully provided him is a step-by-step manual to do exactly what he wants. And so, like, you can't divorce yourself from Project 2025 when effectively you are both advocating for not only the same worldview, but many specific proposals word for word.
And it's his people.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry,
And
he's added in one layer, though. He just rolled out a really specific new conservative policy that is separate from Project 2025, which is we're going to tariff other countries so greatly that we're going to pay for free childcare and free IVF for everybody.
That's true.
It's a very traditional conservative policy.
Can I tell you one?
Jim DeMint is so proud.
One funny thing about the Project 2025 manual, which unfortunately I read, they had to have 2 chapters written on trade.
Right.
Because there's differing views about, whether we do pro-Trump stuff or free market. Who was the pro-Trump chapter written by? Anybody know? He just got out of jail. Peter Navarro.
Peter Navarro, all right.
Yeah. Oh,
amazing.
it was like letters from the Birmingham prison.
It was before he
Like,
went to jail.
It was his version.
Yeah.
His version. Go ahead.
Kamala Harris pivoted not just from democracy to freedom, but particularly reproductive freedom. How risky is it to narrow that definition rather than freedom more broadly?
I mean, I think that's a really great question, but also I did hear at the convention freedom to decide on your own health care, but also freedom to be free from guns in schools. Like, they kind of almost did the reverse of what I just heard.
I'm going to be Bill Kristol here. This is a total ripoff of a guy named George Lakoff. If you want to get nerdy, he wrote a book called Whose Freedom, like 100 years, actually like 30 years ago. That was like, this is what the Democrats should do. He's a Berkeley professor, and I think it's really smart. And they have combined it to some traditional conservative issues, but also sort of glommed some liberal stuff on there, which makes sense, right? Like, you should be free to send your kid to school without worrying they're going to get shot up. I think that makes a lot of sense.
I'll just say because it's really a question about reproductive rights, a little bit about how much do you emphasize that.
Yep.
And one of the things that struck me so much in the focus groups around the way that people talk about abortion is when you ask people, we always ask the same question at the beginning, how do you think things are going in the country? What are you most concerned about? And people always say the economy, inflation, and immigration. Like, they talk about not being able to afford apartments, they talk about rent, they talk about not being able to get into a house, they talk about grocery prices. Abortion rarely comes up. But if you ask about abortion, everybody suddenly has like an opinion, and a strong opinion, especially if you're in a group of all women. We did one in Arizona recently of Republican women, Trump voting women. 3 women in the group had had abortions. 1 had had a catastrophic pregnancy. Everybody had a story about somebody that they knew. And they sort of took care of each other in the group. They were like, it was an emotional conversation. And so one of the things that I constantly say to Democrats who get nervous about talking about abortion too much is that I actually don't think that you can talk about abortion too much. You have to talk about other things, but you do have to keep abortion high salience. And I think tying it to the broader freedom message is a good idea. And I think Kamala Harris has an easier time doing that than Joe Biden. Like, it might be, people are very worried about the idea of there being a female president. I do think we might be in a unique moment where being a woman, because there's a policy at stake, right? Trump's misogyny never had there's a cricket just walking across the stage.
Sure, it's a cricket.
And I'm about to make a good point too. His misogyny never had a policy outcome attached to it, and now it does. JD Vance's misogyny, there's a policy attached to it that matters. Can women trust you?
Right.
And when the answer is no, I think that matters right now more than it used to.
And again,
We've gotten used to Dobbs. I mean, this is the first presidential election since Dobbs, which is probably the most controversial and consequential Supreme Court opinion, the most famous Supreme Court opinion in decades.
Right.
And which was decisively decided by 3 Trump appointees.
Right.
I mean, it's not like these other decisions are controversial, but they're a mixture of appointees, and some people appointed by Democrats, or some people who were appointed 20 years ago.
So he owns that.
No Trump,
Evidence.
no overruling of Roe,
Right.
no Dobbs,
Right.
and here we are in 2024.
Right.
And Trump is obviously terrified of the issue, has done, from his point of view, I guess, an adequate job of muddying the waters, so maybe people will, but they still have to know.
They know.
Harris needs to remind people, though, just the very simple thing. 3 Trump appointees, Roe overridden. The nightmares you're having in Texas now don't happen. If Trump hadn't had a first term, What does the Trump second term look like? What are they going to override next? I think they're totally fair to go to contraception and IVF. Some of the people, they haven't explicitly said they want to curb that. Well, you know what? Justice Thomas said it's a consequence of, it's an implication of Dobbs. And
just quickly, Karl Rove said this morning he thought that the country might be 80-20 in favor of some form of legal access to abortion.
Yeah.
You think that's based on your research?
I do. I mean, I've actually been stunned by how many Republicans, and it shows you, to me, the limitations of polling and why qualitative is so great. Because a line that I heard over and over again, and I laughed the first time, but then heard it so often I realized this is how people think. They said, well, I'm pro-life, but I believe in a woman's right to choose. And so, like, if that person on a survey is saying, oh, I'm pro-life, because that's how they identify, but they still feel like overturning Roe v. Wade was bad, that's the moment that we're in, because they feel like their daughters have fewer rights than they do. They feel that a lot of older women like went through the process of seeing abortion become legal. To now have it be illegal feels like going backward. Yeah, no, it is. There's a reason the referendum on these, and a reason I think I put Arizona in play is it is absolutely a big motivator, and you get tons of Republicans who vote for any. And they may be. They may even be pro-life, but they want exceptions for rape, incest, life of the mother. They want some set of weeks that is not 6. Yeah.
We have 1 minute left, Ian. I'm just going to ask
Why
quickly.
Donald Trump can't figure out his position on it.
I'm going to quickly ask in the last minute, just go down the row. Who will have the majority of the House in January?
The House?
U.S. House.
Democrats.
Bill?
I think Democrats.
Democrats. Amanda?
I don't know, but I'm going to say Republican just to be contrary.
You think Democrats?
I think the Democrats, but I think it's going to be the House. I know it will matter because the Speaker really matters because they have so much control of the floor, but it's going to be under 10 seats one way or the other.
It'll be close. Yeah. Republicans take the Senate?
Absolutely.
Same?
I'm afraid so.
Yeah, Tester.
I saw Larry Sabato.
Vote Colin Allred.
I saw Larry Sabato just move Montana into.
Yeah, Tester's going to lose.
Tester's going to lose.
I mean, Tester's not, but I wonder about a place like Texas, if I can say one word here. Yeah. Tester's is running worse than Allred in the poll. Objectively, if you just came down from Mars and said, what's happening in Montana, what's happening in Texas? Then you said, what was the margin in 2022 or 2020 in Texas? 2020 was Biden was -5.
Almost 6.
6 in Texas. What was the margin in Montana? 20. Why does everyone think Tester, that's really winnable? Allred, that's out of the question. I don't buy that. So you guys should make Allred the next senator.
I agree with that.
All right. We're very lucky to have good friends at the Bulwark and that they come to be with us every year. Please give them a big hand. Sarah, Bill, Amanda, Tim, thank you very much. It was really fun. Thank you.
See y'all later.
You did a great
Good